If you're a new student to advanced poker strategy, it's really hard to tell what is good advice and bad advice, particularly because poker is an extremely complicated game to learn. The influence of luck on the learning process can never be understated, and so a lot of times people think about their hands in completely incorrect ways. In 2012, online poker became illegal in the United States, and so a lot of poker players either had to move to Europe or Canada to continue to play online. They had to move to live games, which were considerably softer than online games, or they had to move exclusively into teaching poker. European players who could still play online poker legally continued to just keep getting better, and they quickly surpassed their American counterparts. And so, because of these phenomena, what happens is now in 2018, there are a lot of former US grinders who are just poker coaches who have never really needed to get better because they've never played against their tougher European counterparts, and they just sell books instead of grinding. So what happens is now they teach a lot of mediocre strategies, or let's just be honest, bad strategies, and they have a lot of people buy books from them, and then they just never get better because they're learning these really junk strategies, and then they need to buy more books, hoping that they'll eventually move up. And so this is a example from a book that just came out called Optimizing Ace King. Now, first off, the book title has a lot of problems because, as a lot of veteran players know, you really should never be thinking of poker in terms of your specific hand, but you should be thinking of poker in terms of your entire range. And so if you're writing a book that just focuses on how to play a hand, it kind of seems to miss a lot of the philosophical construction that we use when we make our ranges. And so in this book, in the example, the button raises, we 3-bet with Ace King, which is very standard, even though I don't really like our bet size. And the flop comes Jack 10-5 rainbow, without the backdoor green draw, club draw, whatever that is. I'm not really used to playing 4-color decks. If we look at the big blind's range, it's a polarized 3-betting range of a little less than 11%. And so when it's a polarized range, that means it's like the very premium hands, like 10s plus, ace queen, and in this case, ace jack suited. And then just a bunch of like random bluff hands, like I guess king 8 suited, queen 7 suited, ace 3 suited. And so like, for one, I really, really hate the way that this range is constructed. I think that as this range expands, it becomes less and less easy to kind of figure out, oh, what exact hands should go in my polarized range versus my value range. Like, should I be raising 10-3 suited in this spot? And additionally, this strategy is just mathematically inferior to a lot of other 3-betting strategies. And so I wanted to show an example of how this old way of thinking about poker is completely inferior to the new modern style that a lot of European players have been playing since the advent of GTO and solver usage. So in the actual text, these guys say c-betting ace king with 100% frequency can quickly become problematic. And then they show you the ranges between the 3-better and the caller and say, oh, look, we're a slight dog. Well, one, while I agree that we're a slight dog because we're using this ridiculous 3-betting range, it also kind of misses the fact that ace-king is indeed one of our best semi-bluffs, which is what they acknowledge, and so in the context of our entire range should almost always be a bet. So I went ahead and put this example into PO Solver. As you can see, I've mimicked their big blind and their button ranges and the pot sizes. And in this scenario, I'm just going to go ahead and build the tree. I'm giving the hero the option of betting a third, a sixth, the full pot, or checking. So I'm giving him a pretty broad range of strategic options on the flop. And the first thing that we're going to notice as this begins to run is that ace-king seems to be a bet the majority of the time. And I'm going to bet dollars to donuts as this begins to solve down to lower exploitability. We're going to see ace-king, especially ace-king of 2 green, betting close to 80 or 90%. I imagine it's just got to be such a strong hand because the rest of your polarized range is so full of air. And so as we look at the strategy, indeed it looks like this particular combination is a bet at least 80% of the time. Also, something to note is that as this begins to solve down and model our EV against our opponents, we have about $93 in EV, which would make a lot of sense given that we have about 45% equity in a $200 pot, right? We should have close to somewhere in the ballpark of $90. Again, looking at the strategy, we notice that ace-king is most definitely a bet here, even though this is actually really not how you should be using PO. You should never be using PO just to look at, oh, did I play my hand correctly? You should be looking at your entire range and how you should be structuring it. So if this is the strategy that is optimal that you want to play with PO Solver, it seems to prefer one bet size, prefer the 2/3 bet size, but the strategy is not exactly intuitive. Sometimes you check top set, sometimes you check middle set. You should bet king 8 suited a tiny percent of the time, but not king 6 suited. 7-5 suited and 5-4 suited are always going to be bets because they're bottom pair. But what do you do when your range, as the 3-better expands and you have hands like jack 4 suited, right? When you have these other kind of junk jacks, do you begin to bet those? Do you begin to check those? If you are using PO in this way, it's kind of hard to tell what you should be doing if you're just looking at individual hands. But regardless, ace-king is definitely a bet here. So when these guys say, oh, betting is quickly problematic, they're just flat out wrong. Let's look at what I would like to call, quote unquote, the modern approach to this situation and why it's going to be so much better. So first of all, again, this is kind of a complicated range to figure out in your head, especially as you have to expand and contract it. So let's just think about a 10.7% range that is going to be strictly for value. So this is what we call a linear 3-betting range, and I'm pretty much just trying to pick the best 10.7% of hands and just 3-bet those. Additionally, in this model, I'm going to take away a lot of our strategic options, and instead of betting 33, 66, 100, and checking, I'm going to give our hero one option. He must bet 40% of the pot 100% of the time. So I'm sure a lot of you are going to be thinking, wow, that seems like a really exploitable strategy. This is what it looks like. 40%, 100% of the time. This strategy, hopefully we can at least agree, is much simpler pre-flop and post-flop than what PO suggests for using a polarized range. When we look at how much money this actually makes when it solves down, this makes $125 out of a $200 pot. This is compared to the polarized strategy, which at best makes $93. So in this scenario, we're playing a strategy that is both easier pre-flop and post-flop and makes $30 more in a $200 pot. So if you are still using this old method that live instructors are teaching of playing polarized ranges on both the pre-flop and the flop, then you are missing out on not only simplifying all of your decisions by a dramatic amount, but you're also leaving tons and tons of money on the table. In this scenario, it seems like we're leaving at least 15% of the pot on the table and playing a much more complicated strategy to execute. So this is just an example where a couple of guys who really don't know what they're doing are still churning out books where they are not giving you good information in terms of giving you good ranges, but they also don't know what to do with those ranges in real life. These guys don't know that you should be c-betting ace-king here. And so you can kind of tell just from one page out of a book that neither of these coaches really know how to approach poker in a structured, holistic fashion. And so that's why they have to have this kind of microscopic, myopic approach where they're like, let's just look at how this hand plays. That's not how you approach poker, and if you do that, you're going to be leaving thousands of dollars on the table and never moving up on stakes, and you're going to have to buy more books. Good luck.